Hello and good morning, students. Today we will be going with the topic regarding the classes and objects in Java. So, as we have already discussed what data types are, I think it is more appropriate if we discuss classes and objects as well. So, today we will be demonstrating how to create a class as well as creating methods in order to simplify functions in the Java. So I would like you to open Android Studio. We will be creating a project. So this will be a revision of our previous basic calculator project. So I would like you to name it uh, last name underscore enhanced basic calculator. Again, last name underscore enhanced basic calculator. So after selecting it, wait, let it load a bit. So while it is currently loading, we will be discussing what classes and objects are. So as we have already discussed regarding classes and objects, we have already figured out what classes is. Classes are being used as the blueprint for creating other objects inside Java. So for example, we are going to create the hero class. It means that it can be reused as a template by other objects. For example, if we are going to create a paladin object from the hero class, it makes everything simplified. So today, um, we will be sampling out how to create a class, as well as uh, creating an object. So our dive with classes will just be a simple one today because uh, is better discussed if we have the topics regarding it. So today we will be focusing more on methods, but we will be touching on uh, what classes are. So so because we are going to create basic calculator, we will be uh, remaking the basic calculator. Again, for those who haven't caught up, I would like you to create a new project and name it uh, last name underscore enhanced basic calculator. Last name underscore enhanced basic calculator. So now that we are in the layout section of our design, we will be wait a bit. I think it forgot to load. Uh, Let me reload the project a bit. So okay, we will be adding the labels as well as the the UI elements that we have used before. So in our UI elements before, we have used uh, two edit texts. Specifically, we can make use of plain text here. Let's switch to the blueprint mode. So let's name this operand 1, text operand 1, text operand 2. Let's bind this. Maybe we can use this lower instead and put an ID. I don't think we need an ID for it anymore. So because this is bound. By the way, for convenience sake, I would like you to enable show system UI if you are going to use uh, if you are going to use design mode so that you will see what other elements are being shown here. Then let's bind this with the other one. So maybe we can change the text later. Let's say the text will become. So let's try recreating our basic calculator from top to bottom. You may also use the XML file of your previous uh, basic calculator if you don't want to redo everything. So now I'm binding this to their respective UI elements. Then we add how many buttons was that? I think it was 5. So let's add 5 buttons. So I'm going to chain this horizontally to make it a bit easier to manage. So now that I have chained it, I made it very convenient for me to uh, create the constraints for the said objects. So let's try changing the symbols as well as the If you have any questions, you may type in our conversation box. Now, I guess that I think most of what we need is complete now. So, what we will be redoing this time would be regarding how we structure our code. So, let's say we don't need IDs for this. I think just the text. Then answer. So I guess this is pretty much complete except for we need to change the text default to 0. Now, um, in terms of coding, we can just copy paste everything from our previous projects if you want to use that. So, to speed things up, let's just copy some of the code that we have already. So, let's go in the Java, then activities. So we can just copy everything from here. Oh, I see. I think I'm made a mistake here. So we can just change this to button instead. I forgot that this is a button. Okay. Let's just give it a fast correction there. Now that everything seems corrected, let's add button addition. I think it's correct. Did I spell it wrong, perhaps? Okay, I spelled it wrong. Then, going here, implements view that on click listener. Then let's paste, uh, let's just paste everything up to this point. So, just to orient you what classes are. So, this is a class. Class indicates the entirety, the body of the code. So, for example, we read this public class main activity. So, this is the class that we are currently using. If you notice, there's something like extends, app compat activity, and as well as implements view on click listener. These are other built-in classes implemented by Java. But we will be learning more about this in inheritance later on. So you don't have to worry regarding what the other parts here. The most important part that this is a class. So sir, how do we create a class? We have already oriented ourselves in creating a class. After all, it is just as simple as right-clicking this folder, clicking new, then Java class. The difference between a Java class and an activity class is that Java class is a bare bones Java file. So let's say class and name it um, sample class. Take note of the capitalization. We are going to use upper camel case for creating a class or a Java class in this instance. So sample class. Let's say sample class. So this is a sample class. So if you take note, uh, this includes the entirety of the code. So everything that we have typed here will be its domain. So same for with the main activity. Everything within this border is his domain. Now, what are these smaller class like things here? If you notice, there is a protected void on create here. We call these things methods. We call this in Java methods. There are other terms for this. For C++, we call these things functions. But you know, right? They sound the same. They function also the same. So methods are objects that allows us to uh, put beyond what a typical object can have. For example, for primitive data types like char, int, as well as string, you will notice that it can only accept one type of data. Methods go beyond that in the fact that they are capable of uh, actually doing something else other than receiving data. So we will be sampling out how to create such. So we have already created two objects here or two methods. The onCreate void method as well as onClick void method. So we will just ignore it for now. We will be focusing on optimizing the code included in each. Tomorrow we will be discussing what is cases as well as other decision-based systems in uh, programming. So for now, we will just be ignoring the bulk of it. We will be changing the code from uh, without actually uh, doing something complicated. So just below this second bracket, which is the domain of onClick, below here, we will be creating our own method. So let's name it um, public static um, the data type, uh, say double. Public static double, then let's say do addition. Let's say do addition. Then parenthesis, which is in 9 and 0. Then curly brackets just below, just beside the P. So this is how you create a method. There are several types of methods actually. The difference between such methods is that they will need to receive a return type, meaning they need to have an output. They need to have an output that corresponds with the data type that you have chosen. For example here, public static double. We can ignore the static for now. Static simply means that it will not change its value once it runs. So we can ignore it for now. Public, we will be discussing also this in module 3, but public means that every other Java class within this project can use this function or method. So you can just ignore this for now, and maybe if we can do it like this, double do addition. So this now becomes a method. So the data type of the method is double. So we named it do addition. So I have stated before that methods need a return type. So let's just type return, then semicolon for now, because we haven't created something to receive the data. So now that we have double, um, let's create something inside the parenthesis. Because our operation needs two operands, right? Operand 1 and operand 2. So let's try recreating these operands here. So let's create double operand 1, comma, double operand 2. So now, the method wants to receive two variables, operand 1 and operand 2. So if we are going to use the do addition, it needs two variables again, operand 1 and operand 2. So now we can put the operation here. Let's say we will be creating another variable. Let's say another double answer is equals to 0.0, and do the operation here. Let's say answer is equals to or assigned to the value of operand 1 plus operand 2. Then the return should be the value of uh, the answer. So let's say return answer. So it means uh, if we invoke the method do addition, it needs two variables, operand 1 and operand 2. So it goes to the whatever function you have typed here. You can even mess up the operation here. Let's say you have typed the multiplication sign instead. So it will do the multiplication. So let's just do the addition here. So it will throw an error unless there is a return value. We can even use the return value 0 here if we want to. So regardless of whether your answer is correct or not, the value will return that it will return is 0. So it can even return the value of 1, 2, 3, whatever the number is. But simply, it will try to return the value of whatever the data type you have invoked it in. So again, this is on double, right? So it will try to return a double value here at the bottom of the method. So let's return the answer. So let's try returning it back to public static so that it can function correctly without errors. S- So, sir, how do we use these methods? So let's switch back to onClick. We already have the same operation done here, right? We already have the same operation done here. So how do we use the, the do addition method here? So for starters, we can remove this line here and maybe put the answer here instead. Do addition. Then add operand 1 here, comma, operand 2. That's how simple, or that's how you're going to use it. Simple as that. Now, let's create one for division as well. So let's try creating for division. Public static double do division. Return. Then again, double operand 1 and double operand 2. Guys, if you have any questions, just type or raise your hand in our chat. If you have any question, I'm sure you might be confused with how this works. So here in our sample or in our another method, um, though we type operand 1 and operand 2 here, it really doesn't matter. This is just a placeholder name. So let's type uh, double X and double Y instead. So if we're going to change this to X and Y, it doesn't really matter. Even if we, it's still operand 1 and operand 2 here. So as you notice, we have compressed the code into something more cleaner to look at. So again, let's redo whatever we did earlier. Answer is equals to 0.0. Then answer is equals to x divided by y. Then return answer. Again, let's just uh, do it here. Replace answer with do division. Then operand 1 and operand 2. So it simultaneously creates the answer while you are currently uh doing the code, right? So we eliminated the need for uh creating the operation first, then putting it in the text box. We simplified everything. So let's do this again for the other operations. We will be naming it, so don't worry. So let's do the multiplication, then then division, multiplication, subtraction. Then let's replace this with, then lastly, modulo. So we don't need this anymore. So I guess this is it. Let's just replace everything here. Replace the answer. We do whatever it is written in here. Subtraction. Then we can remove this because we don't, this is a redundant function. So we don't need this anymore. We can even delete answer here because we don't need the function. Now, we can try it out in our code. You can try it out. So let's uh, test it with our phones. Let's do this, an emulator. So before we move on, any questions? I will. I am currently entertaining any questions. Be it, if you have any questions, please do so. Type it in our chat. So let's try this again. Let's see if it works. So as you can see, though it maintained the functionality of the code, or rather the functionality of the calculator, it simplified everything in the readability level of the code. So this is what happens in the code. First, when you execute the program, the first method that the phone will read would be the onCreate. So upon using the onCreate, you have assigned these buttons as listeners, right? For example, this line 26 to line 30 is in charge of making sure that the functions have, or rather the buttons have a function by setting a listener on it. Meaning that this function, these methods in 26 to 30 make sure that there would be feedback when you press these buttons. Now, let's move on to onClick. OnClick method is triggered every time you click a button. But in this switch case scenarios, this is the time in which you are able to put code or programs in it to make it have a functionality that you need. So any questions? Because I think we have discussed this a bit faster than I expected. We can move on to uh, Module 2, Lesson 3 in our first topic. Any questions before we move on? No questions from you guys? Okay. So, I guess there's no questions regarding our lesson for today. We will be moving on to Lesson 3. So that's how we implement methods. So I want you to implement, starting from now on, to implement any functions that relate uh to relate to anything regarding our program to be in method form. So another orientation regarding the method format. So methods typically have return values, right? You already know that. So for example, let's do um public static int simple addition. For example, this is just an example. So it will throw an error because it needs a return value. So that's why we need to put by the end of this method a return value. Let's say return 0, for example. Because this is an int, it needs an integer value. Now, let's say this is a simple uh this is simple, what do you call this? Simple addition. So let's just create int x and int y. Then the operation is, you can simply do the operation at return. So x plus y. So you can do it as simple as that. We can even optimize the code here. You can even remove the answer part and do the operation at return value as well. So let's say here. So now it only took one line to answer everything. Can remove, changes to return. So now that we have optimized everything, it only took now a single line to answer. So why am I discussing why this has return values? There is a special case um, regarding data types in methods. There is there is a method that can have no return value. You are already seeing it. So again, this is a method. But void means, let's create our own void is a data type. The difference between the typical data types such as int, character, double, float, string, the difference between void is that it can accept data. For example, it can accept double x and double y, but it can totally function without a return value. Let's say void. Uh, so it can totally function without a return value. That is the difference between the typical methods and void method. So void methods do not need a return value. Now, any questions? Questions before we move on to our next topic? Okay, none? Okay, I want you to submit this in, you can disregard the simple addition and black hole, but I want you to submit this uh, enhanced basic calculator in GitHub. Now, let's move on to lesson 3. So for lesson 3, we will now be touching on how we can manipulate the program to um, do a certain kind of work in a certain kind of conditions. So we call this uh, flow control or control flow, meaning that we can uh, change the direction of how the program progresses. Um, the simplest way of explaining this is uh, this one. We are at this point in our program, meaning that uh, we can make the program go here or go here. That is control flow. We already know what the symbol is, right? We already know what the symbol is, right? This denotes decision. So now we will be learning our first uh, decision, or rather our first logic. So now I would like you to create a new project in Android Studio. Name it last name underscore if then. Again, last name underscore if then. Click finish. Now, this time I will allow you to have a free form on how you are going to be doing this in our project. So now let's go back to our design. Let's go to the design and just add two buttons. Add two buttons. As you notice, it already has a hello world text view here. I want you to expand this hello world text view. Maybe it will auto expand later on. Maybe let's turn on the system UI. Okay. Add two buttons and constrain them, chain them horizontally. Then make the other one depend. Then do it like this. Then let's add another text view here. Let's rename this as uh, text answer. Then the button one should be ID'd as uh, button decision 1, and the other being button decision 2. Button decision 2. Let's try building a lore for ourselves, okay? Let's try building a lore. Uh, we can add an ID on this. Maybe, let's say, text lore. So now we have changed it to text lore. Let's try binding this here. let's try binding this here. Can use the code here. So let's say button, then let's say button decision one, find by ID, then r.id, then what's the ID of the button? Decision one, button decision one. Okay, button decision two, find view by ID, r.id, that button decision two. Then let's add the listeners. Okay, again, implements view on click listener. Then let's say on click listener. Then let's type this button decision 2, this. Okay. Later we will be learning what this, the word this here indicates. But for now, let's just ignore it. Let's copy the on click the on click uh method. Then inside it, let's just copy the switch. Button decision. Let's say button decision 1. The next one is set break is ID that button decision 2. Then break. Then lastly, the closing tag. Now, we have both the decisions here. Let's try adding the text views first. I forgot the text views. So text view, maybe we can add the text view here instead. So let's add the text view here. Text view, uh, text lore, once find view by ID, then r.id, the text lore. Then what's the name of the other one? Let's rename this to text uh decision instead. Decision. Text decision. So let's do this and for another time, another one. So now we already have our everything intact here. So let's set the text here. For example, text lore. I want you to create your own story. We will be adding more on this later on. Tomorrow, I mean. Um, let's say you found. It's up to you how you create your own lore, okay? Um, very dark. It is evening. You hear weird sounds around you. What will you do? Okay, let's try running this. Where's the mobile phone? Let's try running this because I think, did I set it correctly? Wait. Oh, I see. So let's just do this here. Okay, I have a mistake. So let's move the text lore here because we are on create. This is supposed to be on create. So let's move the text lore here. Then move the whole text lore line just below the text view. So let's try doing the program again. So now, uh, you will re- it will read like this. Why did it turn black? So we'll see something like this. So we can change the text inside the button, no? But we can also add it here. So let's say, will you try to create a fire? So now we have added something here. So let's say, will you try to create a fire? Now, let's change the buttons to indicate yes or no. Say yes here, then no here. So we won't bother with if else first, yeah. Because if else is something that we are going to use like so for now, let's see if decision 1 and decision 2, let's say um we are going to say, what is it again? So text answer, wait, where's this text answer, by the way? Oh, okay, text decision. I text decision dot set text. Then let's say uh as you try to rummage in pitch dark, something beat your hand. You collapse right away. Then let's just copy this one, paste it here. But this time, let's say you shiver in cold. You feel like you are experiencing hypothermia. So let's rerun this code. So This is a basic decision system regarding the use of case. This is a basic decision system using the use of case, in which we will be discussing more tomorrow. But by using this, it allows you to actually manipulate the data, or rather, actually manipulate what the decision or the outcome of the program is. So, for now, we will end our lesson for today with this. Any questions before uh, we conclude our class for today? Any questions? We will continue more about this if else tomorrow. This is just introduction of what we are going to discuss tomorrow. Okay, Narka, what's your question?
Sir, if ever ang button, sir, is not functioning, unsay murag basically ang issue is either sa line sa code.
Um, if the button is not functioning, usually the error stems from the on-click listener or the decision that you have made here. So for example here, button decision set on-click listener this. If this is not correctly set, then the button will not function. So let's compare this with the functioning one, which is our program earlier. So let's do this here side by side. Okay, here. Comparing it with our project from before, sa basic calculator, you will notice that it already has uh, set the buttons here, right? So find view by ID, then set on click listener. Then when it comes here, there should be the decision. It should be as simple as this, right? So text button decision. So if the button is not functioning well, try to compare it with the code that you have created for the basic calculator. Usually it just happens if um namali ninyo og set ang set on click listener, like for this instance. Kay uh, the view on click listener decides if the button actually listens to your input. Okay, Bea, do you have a question regarding, do you have the similar question with Luke? Any questions?